Hello, friends. I am Kat Kabira. And today, maybe to some of you to no surprise, I would love to talk briefly about energetic boundaries. Now, it's the last week of my Badass Boundaries course, and part of what we're reviewing this week is astral boundaries and psychic and energetic boundaries. And actually, grounding and boundaries is really one of the cornerstones to my work. And for me, what was a game changer was the very first time I received a session way back when from one of my teachers. And I remember it took him about an hour before he put his hands on me. Now I could feel so much happening, within that hour. And part of it, of course, was that he was contacting the different layers of my energy field. But one thing that he shared with me was, my body was very clear that it just didn't want to be touched. Now, someone who has been abused physically, emotionally, sexually, several times since she was young, that was like a new thing that, one, I had boundaries, and two, you mean someone's going to respect them? Because I didn't actually even know for myself what my boundaries were. And I really took that home. And at the time, I didn't even understand how highly sensitive I was. And that, especially when you're working with more highly sensitive people, you might end up working off body the whole time, meaning not touching them. That there might be a slower entry rate, and that there's a lot of subtle nuances that our energy field communicates that, most of us just aren't trained to be aware of. And when I used to teach 200-hour and 300-hour yoga teacher trainings or 500-hour yoga teacher trainings, I couldn't help but share the world of energy. And I would share what I call energetic adjustments. And how do you sense, as a teacher, when you're coming into someone in their field, where does their boundary actually begin? Because our boundaries don't start at the skin, like they start at the field. And our field shapeshift. All of us, like if we're feeling less safe, potentially our field will get a lot bigger. Or, when I'm teaching, my field will be a lot bigger. And that there's a lot of information that what a lot of us just think is like pure space. There's a lot of information in this space. There's so much going on. And so one of my passions is to make us aware, both for ourselves, understanding our own energy body, but also if you're a practitioner, if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a therapist, if you're a healer, that you can actually sense all this information that someone's system is communicating. Now, whether we're talking energetic or if we're talking life, a way to create safety and trust is to actually respect boundaries. And, if we look at like what's happening globally, always, we don't live in a world where boundaries are being respected. I could go on a long tirade about it, but, yeah, if we even look at, various legislation around women and women's bodies, that isn't a respect of boundaries. If we look at, certain culture, including like porn culture, it's not really about respect of boundaries. And a lot of us have functioned in a way where in order to just kind of like survive on this planet, we basically numb out from the things that are actually not okay to somehow kind of get through and feel okay. So kind of my passion is to get you back in line with your feeling, which also is you getting back in line with your truth, and to not try to make things okay that aren't. Just the other day, a person who follows my posts was like, like, just, there's a way where you can just choose to be happy. And, my response to that is for sure. I mean, like if we look at the four directions in shamanic terms, hummingbird joy is one of the directions. I teach a course called The Power of Pleasure, but to really get into what that joy, to really get to happiness, which happiness is one of the myriad of rainbow emotions. We're more than just happy. That'd be like deciding that you're only going to play in one key musically for the rest of your life, or like only paint with one color. Like we are multidimensional. We are everything. And part of the pleasure is even like being able to stretch ourselves, to be able to like welcome all the nuances and aspects of being a human. But if we're even on a mission of, I want to actually come from my core, I really want to feel this joy of being, that will never happen if you suppress yourself. Just to be clear. And it will never happen if you're like, today I'm going to be happy, right? And, both in my personal experience and in working with people, part of what gets our joy back online is also allowing our grief to be there, allowing our anger to be there. Like if you're either suppressing or trying to manipulate your feelings instead of letting them move through like a wave, you're literally like setting up dams in your life force, and you're not going to flow. And you want the whole universe to flow through you. So it's a little bit of a side note, but the way I can tie it back in with boundaries is there is, if we're going to do healing work with someone else, it really is, first and foremost, to meet someone where they're at and not think what's best for them, and to really listen and to be able to follow and respond. And so if you really want to be able to meet someone where they are, you have to actually see, where are they and where are they saying, like, this is as far as you can come. So I kind of liken it to a house. If you're standing in someone's energy field and, you eventually might want to put your hands on them to do some other things. It's kind of like you're sitting in the garden of their house and you're kind of waiting for them to invite you in. And actually being okay with, they may not invite you in. So there's a lot of nuances that we get to discover in doing healing work of, how do I respect someone's boundaries? If I do want to get invited in, what does this person need to feel safe enough? Am I grounded enough for them to want me to come in? Can they sense that, that there might be an agenda there? And what is it like to really be soft enough to create that level of safety, to be invited into someone's deepest space that they're willing to take you to, their vulnerability? You can't force trust. You can't force vulnerability. And the reality is that ourselves, it's very tender being a human, and we have our own defenses and our fears around, am I even willing to see myself right now? Am I even willing to meet this pain that I might have for 20 or 30 plus years worked really hard at not feeling? When do we start to feel safe enough to meet ourselves? So I spend a lot of time, if you're going to learn how to work with energy with others, with me, is how can you sense someone's boundaries and have the patience to wait there and then get invited in. And it's a very feminine approach, because it's almost like a tantric approach. If we're going to even think about, I'm going to do a little side note to tantric sex. I'm not a tantric sex expert, but I do know certain things that create a lot of pleasure and orgasm. And part of it too is not just forcing one's way in, but actually the waiting and the being with that will create a level of safety, and almost waiting for when the person is showing the signals of like, yeah, now I'm ready. Now I actually would like for you to enter. It's a very different experience, a whole different experience. Like we don't need to force anything, whether sexually or energetically, or even with our own healing. You know, the biggest work that I teach is the more grounded and safe you are, then the healing just happens on its own. And we oftentimes forget that, you know, and we do come from cultures of over efforting. So a feminine practice is, how do I wait? How do I listen? How do I create nurturing and safety? And then suddenly the system will say, oh, I can trust you. Well, let me take you in. Let me show you into my world. And let me tell you some stories. And so it sounds simplistic, but, you know, in teaching this work for 20 years, it's really hard, especially for those of us who like to be good at stuff. And especially if we've been trained in other approaches, it takes a lot of patience, that knowing that there's value in waiting and listening and sensing this force that's already here. And from that place, that's where we start to move from. So it's almost taking that pressure off that we need to be the all-knowing and creating the energy. And it's like, oh my God, we drop into this place where there's this magnificent life force. And then from there, it's like, we just follow. So going back to boundaries, it's a real gift that you can give to someone, whether it's a friend or a client or a child or a lover, where it's like, I can actually sense where your boundary is, and I'm actually not going to push that. You know, for a lot of us, I mean, we end up taking courses on how to work with boundaries because we felt trespassed so many times in our life that we feel overwhelmed, and almost like in a fear response, and feeling like, you know, I just want to have my boundaries respected. So it's a real gift where it's like, you can just sit with someone and it's like, I'm so with you. I'm so with you. That's it. I'm with you. And although you can always tell me whatever you need, I'm so with you that you don't even need to tell me like back off a little bit, or, you know, step back, or that's too much. It's like, oh my God, it is such a gift for all of us when we feel really seen and listened to. And to really nail that, you know, we have to be grounded in ourselves. If we're a practitioner, we have to know what our own boundaries are, and also really sense where someone else is. And that also really helps. And this is a whole different discussion. But for those of you who do the healing work and you're like, I notice I get sick after sessions, or it's hard for me to clear, or, you know, even if you don't do healing work, but, you know, empaths, you know, going into public or parties just always feels like too much. You know, there's a lot of nuances and boundaries. So I've got a course coming up. It's my level 1 energy healing course called Connection, and it starts at the end of September. I've got 2 spots left. And in there, you know, along with learning a specific protocol and how to do hands-on and also remote healing work, you really will get to know the nuances of boundaries. And what I've discovered in teaching this for so long is that people who even think that they like no boundaries, you will learn nuances that will surprise you. You know, there are some game changers in there, and it will really help you both in your own awareness of your energy system, but also in working with others. So I hope you have a very wonderful day, and contact me, you know, if you're ever interested in learning how to do energy healing. 2 spots left, and I'll see you soon.